It is the 10th of May 1733. The mood is festive in Wittenberg. The university town in eastern Germany is welcoming Kurfürst Friedrich August II of Saxony. A parade of students welcomes the ruler. One of them, a master of art, has the honor of addressing the elector. Anton Wilhelm Amo is the one chosen to address the son of Augustus the Strong in perfect Latin. However, it was not so much the perfect Latin that caught the eye of the elector, but precisely the color of the skin of the person opposite him. After all, Anton Wilhelm Amo, the pride and joy of the university in Wittenberg, is the first student of African descent to attend a European university, the first black professor at a Western European university, and 1 year later, the first African philosopher to receive a doctorate in Germany. And so Anton Wilhelm Amo may well lead the corps of students on this day of celebration for two reasons. Firstly, because he is the showpiece of the university and the embodiment of the ideas of the Enlightenment, the promise made flesh that every human being, regardless of origin, is gifted with reason. On the other hand, Amo is a brilliant philosopher who takes on the other grades of the Enlightenment, such as Descartes, in his writings. Amo went from being an object of experimentation to a showpiece, a doctor of philosophy who once came to Europe as a slave, a phenomenon whose exceptionality is always particularly emphasized, dismissed in history as a kind of accident, probably also in order to avoid imitators. The elector who's greeted by Amo on this day, like many of the others present, only knows black people as slaves who came to Europe from Africa or from travel reports where they are often described as uncivilized savages. This is also how Anton Wilhelm Amo's journey began. He grew up near Axim in Ghana, then called the Gold Coast. In 1707, at the age of 4, he was snatched from his family, taken into slavery, then transported on a West India Company slave ship from his home via the Caribbean to Amsterdam. The West India Company gives the boy as a human gift to the court of the Duke of Brunswick-Wolfenbüttel. European princes liked to adorn themselves with kammermoors. Black servants in the entourage were supposed to show prestige and power. They were considered exotic decoration. But Duke Anton Ulrich had other plans for his gift. First, he had the boy baptized with the name Anton Wilhelm. Surprisingly, he was left with his birth name Amo too, because normally African slaves were only given a single first name. He also offered him a classical education at a knight's school, but the Duke probably did not do this out of the goodness of his heart. No, perhaps Amo served him as an experiment, according to the motto, how much education can an African savage take? Or perhaps the Duke wanted to test the thesis of the Enlightenment on the living object, which the proto-racist society denied the ability to reason. In fact, Amo soon became intellectually bored in Brunswick, and with the permission of his patron, was allowed to go to the university in Halle, where he enrolled in philosophy and law. Just 2 years later, he graduated with a master's degree. Particularly remarkable here is the subject of his thesis, which was defended entirely in Latin, De Jure Malorum in Europa, which translates to On the Legal Status of Black People in Europe. It is the first thesis against slavery that used European laws and logic against them. Amo first argues that the Roman emperors gave the African chiefs a legal status that guaranteed them unviolable rights. He then asks what the freedom of the blacks bought by the Christian extends to. Is it legitimate for many of the blacks who were deported to Europe to have to work as servants or slaves without rights? Quite the jurist, he bases himself on Roman law, which prevails in large part, and natural law, and the result is clear. All human beings are equal. Therefore, black Europeans are entitled to the same rights as white. Here, he not only indirectly accuses Christians of being more backward on the slavery issue than the Romans were 1,500 years ago, but challenges the whole concept of slavery. This work inspired the early campaigners for the abolition of slavery, which makes Amo the pioneer of anti-racism. The disputation was a success, but the subject did not appeal to everyone. Unfortunately, none of this work by Amo has survived today. Whether the writings were simply lost in time, or whether there was help to prevent such ideas from spreading, remains forever unanswered. The scholars of the time have their own justification for slavery. The Enlightenment promises equal rights for all, but they made sure to argue that we are not all equal by nature. And so they all try to put the system of slavery and exploitation on supposedly biological foundation. Thus, the Swedish natural scientist Carl Linnaeus publishes the destructive construct of the races, according to which the white Homo europaeus is superior to all others. From now on, encyclopedias also describe black people as brutish, lazy, stupid, and ignorant. Even Voltaire, although officially an opponent of slavery, is convinced blacks are intellectually and culturally inferior to white. And Immanuel Kant will also write as late as 1775 that blacks are full of affect and passion. They assume education, but only an education of servants. Amo, the living counter-evidence, now went to Wittenberg, where he began to lecture in medicine, metaphysics, and logic, in addition to his studies in psychology, physiology, and medicine. It was during this time that the Kurfürst paid a visit to Wittenberg. After only 6 weeks at the university, he took a second master's degree on the subject of the Humanen Mentes Apoeia, on the apathy of the human mind. He is now making a name for himself in the world of philosophy as an expert on the mind-body problem. This is about the supposed dualism between mind and body, and the question of where sensations arise and who perceives them, the body or the mind. According to Amo, the two are radically separate, so radically that pain inflicted on the body can only be felt by the body. Here, Amo represents views of the ancient Stoics, according to which freedom in the spirit can be attained, even when the body is in pain and chained. The mind is immaterial and cannot feel the pain. Instead, the body sends signals to the mind so that it can respond. Sounds very banal, but this is actually a topic that has been argued about for a long time, and which is not completely answered even today. Today, it is even argued that quantum effects ensure that the stimulus is transformed into a reaction in the brain. Philosophy and physics are mixing here, but we are going too far now. Amo's contribution to the essential topic is unfortunately often forgotten here. And he openly argued against Descartes, who believed that body and mind cannot be separated, and that there is a certain organ in the brain, the pineal gland, that converts signals into feelings. Amo was always developing his philosophy. He was never finished with his thesis. Amo's thinking is one that is always in flux, both in terms of his own cultural affiliation and thinking through abstract philosophical problems. There is no certain knowledge and truth of changeable things, because it can always happen that the opposite occurs. Amo now went to Jena to teach. Here he devoted himself to physiognomy, geomancy, astrology, and cryptography, which were popular contemporary academic subjects. In his teaching days, Amo's philosophy was known beyond the borders of Prussia, but then changed in 1747. Despite his academic achievements, he remained the black man for many, and so at some point the racist insults become too much for him, and he decides to bid farewell to European bourgeois life and returns to his homeland in West Africa after more than 40 years. Here, after all this time, he meets his father and sister again and supposedly spends his twilight years as a fortune teller. In Europe, he had long chosen the path of adaptation, following his model, the Greek philosopher and also freed slave Epictetus. Had he not done so, he would hardly have been able to master such a career. But he was still met with hostility, because even if he had adapted, his environment did not. And so it would be another 220 years before another African student would enroll at the university in Halle. Anton Wilhelm Amo is still remembered today primarily as an exceptional black man, and not as the exceptional philosopher and scholar he was. So we are making the same mistakes as we did then. The debate about his memory is still controversial today. What do you think Amo would say to the debate? Possibly it is this: it is not enough to tell the truth unless the cause of the untruth is also determined. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're interested in more of these kind of interesting characters of history, please click here.